What's up, everybody? My kids are asleep in the next room, and it is after 10 o'clock at night, but I refuse to go, even one day, without recording a podcast right now, leading up to the start of the fantasy NBA season. What's up, everyone? I know I look weird right now. The room is dark, other than just the very bright light shining on my face. I'm not wearing a hat, and I feel naked. But I'm Dan Vespris, and I'm going to be using a little bit of a quieter voice tonight because I don't want to wake up the kids at a super late hour because that will screw up tomorrow, and then that begets a very difficult week. You can follow me on social at Dan Vespris. You can follow the network at Old Man Squad on Twitter. It'll follow you back. Old Man Squad Fantasy over on Instagram. That's where the shorts are going out. Today, we're going to be breaking down a 14-team mock draft, but it's not live. I did it earlier today, and I thought it'd be more interesting if I did it and then was able to kind of go back, and we're going to look at the first 6 rounds and talk about who the different teams were picking from, the choices they had, the choices they were making, and how that might be able to steer you guys into a right direction, just generally on what types of guys are available at the different junctures during that 14-teamer. And you can see it here as I throw it up on the board for you. This is a look at rounds 1 and round 2. I will read the names for those that are listening and not watching the show. But then we're going to look at things like, okay, well, first of all, Luka went first in this one, but it's like, by the end of the top 3, everything is the same there anyway. But, here are the guys that the first few teams can look at that are probably coming back near them in the second round. Here are the guys that you're looking at towards the end of the first round, beginning of the second round, where I put myself. But again, I don't think it matters where I was so much as we're going to look at what everybody was dealing with in this particular mock draft, and less so about the exact build that the teams came up with. Not so much that as it is, here's who they were choosing from, and here are the different directions you might want to go in those spots. Before we get started, please do hit the like button. It goes a long way. Folks watching the show right when it first comes out is also useful, although I realize I'm dropping this in the middle of the night in the United States, so that's probably kind of a stupid decision. Comment if you feel so inclined. I'm trying to respond to everybody up until the season starts on these YouTube comments. It'll probably get easier after that point, come to think of it. So we'll see if we can keep that going. Subscribe. The continued growth of Old Man Squad has been insane. We're over 3,500 subs now. And drop that 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. They've got every stat, every matchup breakdown, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. BetOnline is the largest catalog of odds on everything from football to baseball playoffs to hockey to NBA to political props. And when the game's over, you can head down to the online casino, get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering, BetOnline. The game starts here. As you can see, the first round went, and I don't, whatever. We can talk about the team names if you want. This was not a Twitter mock draft. This was actually me just parachuting into a draft that was about to happen on Yahoo in 3 minutes, and they had the last 2 slots open. Great. Worked out fantastic for us. I took the very last slot because everybody wants to know how to try to save face when you're picking on the turn. And in the first round, again, I'm dead last here, 14 names. I'll give you them in chunks of 7 or so. Went Luka, then Wemby, then Jokic, which is a little bit of an odd twist, but whatever. Anthony Davis went 4, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander went 5. Giannis 6th. Anthony Edwards went 7th. So again, we talk on this show a lot about how, everything is so set. That's really only the case in the expert community. If you just float into a random mock draft, weird things have already happened here. Edwards, Ant-Man going 7 AD before Shai, Luka before both Wemby and Jokic. And the weird doesn't end, although I suppose it's a little bit less from here through the next 15 guys or so. Tyrese Halliburton goes 8th, Joel Embiid 9th, Jason Tatum goes 10th, Trae Young 11th, Steph Curry 12th. This is all pretty normal. Jalen Brunson went 13th. In kind of an interesting twist, which, of course, was music to my ears because I ended up with James Harden and Donovan Mitchell on the turn. And I didn't really think too much about it. My other choice there, I'll just give you my own thoughts before you loop back around, and I'll give you the second round selections. The other names that I considered was to go James Harden with Sabonis, but I don't I don't really like Sabonis early in the second round. I know he's like a cut and dry second round type of guy, but I'm always hunting upside. And there really isn't much there if he's not playing all 82 ball games. LaMelo Ball was another one I considered to pair with Harden because they are strikingly similar in their fantasy games. I know they get there in kind of different ways, but they're both going to be pretty high scoring, good three-pointers, decent rebounding from a guard spot, big assists, big steals, especially for LaMelo, some blocks from a guard, more for Harden than Ball, poor field goal, decent free throw, high turnover guy. So that would have been kind of leaning into, can I get these 5 and change strong categories? But ultimately, if you're down on the turn, punting is definitely in the mix, but taking shots on guys that have had a lot of trouble making it through a season is a little bit iffy, he says, while also drafting Donovan Mitchell. But with Mitchell, it's not the same thing over and over again. I'll be putting out a short on Joel Embiid, by the way. The fact that he's ruled out for the entire preseason is pretty unfortunate. But here's the second round. So I took Donovan Mitchell at 15. Then I went Kevin Durant at 16, Domantas Sabonis at 17, LaMelo Ball at 18, Devin Booker at 19, and Dame at 20. Nothing too crazy there so far. KD a little earlier than expected. Chet Holmgren at 21, Fox at 22, Paolo at 23. And I get it. This is probably the Giannis team. It is. But, oh boy, that is a spicy play because, yeah, Cat right after that. Sorry, I didn't mean to yell. That might have woken up the children. I've lost track of where we're at with this. Cat at 24, LeBron at 25, Şengün 26, which, again, I'd rather pair him up with someone who's bad at free throw shooting already. Kyrie at 27, an unbelievable draft slot and mega steal on Kyrie, and Scotty Barnes at 28. So, again, this is just a regular Joe's draft. It's part of why I find Yahoo Public Prize League so unbelievably entertaining, because weird crap like this happens all the time. But this is what you should be thinking about. Understand that the opponents in your league, whoever you're playing with, are probably going to be a cross-section, a perfect blend of people who are extremely competent in fantasy basketball, some that don't pay attention. Like, think about your home league. Think about your couple of home leagues, depending on how many you have. I have a Roto league that's largely with, well, that's like half people that have been following me for a long time and some friends of friends and stuff like that. And you get weird picks on fantasy draft night. It doesn't always go the way that the mocks with all of the other old man squad listeners goes. It doesn't go like the expert mocks. There's an unpredictability to these that you don't get in expert mocks. It's part of the reason why I typically don't do that many expert mocks. I'm happy to pop in on others when they need me, but I only host one because I think that there's a little bit of an echo chamber thing that goes on there. They're fun. Love hanging out with these dudes, but I don't think we learn much from them. Okay, so let's start at the top. The first 3 or 4 guys, and again, sort of a weird chunk here, but Luka, Wemby, Jokic, Shea, Anthony Davis, in some whatever order in this particular draft. Not that. The guys that they were looking at towards the end of round 2, and I think we could probably look at a few of them. In this case, was Scotty Barnes, who I think generally will go a little bit earlier, but Kyrie Irving was still there, LeBron, Şengün, Cat, De'Aaron Fox, and then the fact that Paolo went early sort of eased the burden on everyone. But Paolo was really the only one that was way out of whack in that second round, right? Because, okay, maybe that moved everyone down one click, but like Dame going at 20 instead of 23 is not that weird. Kevin Durant going at 16 instead of 19 is not that weird. Şengün in the mid to late 20s, we've seen that plenty. Like, most of these guys went within 2 or 3 slots of where we're seeing them going. Paolo was the weird one, and Brunson way up in the first round was a weird one, but that pretty much got covered up. Like, Brunson took the place of James Harden or Donovan Mitchell or Sabonis or Durant or whatever, but he would have been off the board by around pick 20 in most drafts anyway. Probably right around where Dame went in this one. So if you're drafting one of those guys like a Luka or a Wemby or a Jokic or a Shea near the beginning of a 14-teamer, The guys you should assume you're going to be picking from when it comes back to you near the end of round 2 are guys like De'Aaron Fox, although he might get plucked by a punt team before he can get to you. Cat is probably going to be going, I would think, in the early 20s. So you got a shot, but maybe not a great one. LeBron, Kyrie, Şengün. And then if we want to go a little bit farther, which we can, but I'm going to have to zoom in and then I'm going to have to zoom back out again. Bear with me here, guys. We're doing a little bit of a kind of remedial tech on today's show. Maxey, Paul George were other guys. Lauri Markkanen, Cade. These are guys that you'll be able to choose from. So then the question becomes, what do we do in that spot? Well, now you're talking about a pairings show, which I'm not going to do another 35 minutes on pairing on today's episode. But, if you have Wemby, you're probably looking at a more assist-friendly guard type at the end of that second round. So Kyrie's not a terrible option there. LeBron, believe it or not, is not a horrible option there, although he helps the field goal, hurts the free throw, so that kind of balances out a little bit. The guys like Fox and Dame and Booker and LaMelo will likely be gone by the time it gets to you at the very end of the second round. So you can't take that Wemby, hyper assist steals focused guard quite the same way. Your choices there are kind of one or the other, really. Like you could go with, here, let's just zoom in on a third round here at the top. You could go with Tyrese Maxey, who's going to score and get some assists, but he's not going to be a big steals guy. And he's a little bit more efficient than typically what folks are doing that are going Wemby and then maybe punting field goal. You could go really early on Cade and think about it more as like a punt turnover type of thing. And I think there's a pretty good shot that Cade punt field goal, punt turnover is probably a top 25 guy this year. You could go Paul George, especially with the news of Joel Embiid missing the whole preseason, and just say, all right, PG, he's not really a punt field goal guy. He's not really a punt turnover guy, but he is going to get me points and steals, even if I don't get the assists that I want. And therein lies the problem. You kind of have to choose, whereas in a 12-teamer, you don't really have to choose between the categories you want. Someone like LaMelo or Dame falling to you, other than steals with Dame, I guess, you knock out multiple of the things you need when you start Wemby and not worry a ton about field goal percent. Those guys are going to be gone. Your other option, by the way, is Freddie VanVleet. And I realize that taking him at 27, 28 feels very early, and he doesn't score very much. But the rest of his fantasy stats are actually a perfect fit with a Wemby punt field goal team. Big steals, nice assists, keeps the turnovers lower, so that doesn't become a big issue. And you'll have another pick in just a moment. Let's remember that you actually get 2 selections in this range. So you're not stuck just covering the one thing. So my recommendation would be, if you're looking at it from the Wemby standpoint, no, you don't get Dame, and you're not going to get a Dame LaMelo pairing at the end of the second, beginning of the third. That's probably not going to be there for you. But you could still do something like VanVleet, Paul George, or Paul George Cade, or VanVleet Cade, and combining those two guys, you're obviously not going to be as strong in assists as a team that starts with Halliburton, Trey, or Harden, but you can just keep piling them on in a way that team can't. A Trey Harden team, let's say a team got Trae Young and James Harden together, like that team is rolling in assists, but they don't have the basically this sort of ace in the hole that is Victor Wembanyama, who's going to add that extra category. So at some point, they're going to have to take a big man, and they're not going to be able to compete with you in blocks in what they take. So you have this huge advantage, and at some point, they're going to have to take a few of them, and you might just go out there and get one more shot blocking big and say, I don't care about rebounding. I don't care about field goal percent. Let me get more blocks, and I'm going to take 9 guards and wings that assist around it. And that's where you can kind of cover some of that ground where you are trying to make sure you stay pace with those other assist teams. If you have a pick in the and this goes for the other guys up there too, Luka and Jokic, in my mind, there are parallels there. Just in you have this very well-rounded base. Luka obviously not as strong as Jokic in the percentages, And so with Jokic, again, my thought on Jokic is you can pretty much do anything you want. I don't think I would go Karl Anthony Towns in the second round and double up on bigs. You probably want to go guard there, but the guard window is much larger. You could go Kyrie, who doesn't assist as much, but you have these massive efficiency spikes. A Kyrie Jokic start is going to be incredible field goal and free throw percent. I don't know how excited I would be to go Şengün there either. Just again, you're doubling up on big men. You could go Maxey. Not a lot of upside there. Paul George. Like literally everything works with Doncic and Jokic. But these are the guys that are going to be in your lap. What about if you're in the middle of the first round, running from like pick 5 to pick 9, 10, something like that in a 14-teamer? What should you be trying to do? Well, you could have Giannis, in which case you play it a little bit like you would in a 12-teamer. The odds of Fox getting back to you in a 14-teamer are lower, but still not completely out of the question. And the odds of either Fox or LeBron getting to you, you'll probably have an opportunity to get one of those guys. So you can still kind of lean into the punt free throw deal. And we'll talk about the third and fourth round in just a minute here. If you're not on Giannis, if you're, say, sitting on, like Tyrese Halliburton at pick 8 or something like that, the middle of the next round, instead of being guys like Booker, you're probably looking more at, like a Holmgren. Cat is probably going to be an option there. I don't think KD is going to still be around. Scotty Barnes is probably your other choice. So, that's a difference. Whereas with Halliburton at pick 8 or 9 in a 12-teamer, you might even have a shot at Kevin Durant. Donovan Mitchell might still be there. Sabonis might still be there. Ball, Booker, all those guys could still be there for you with Halliburton. And if you're in a 14-teamer, a handful, 2, I would think, of those guys will be gone. Possibly more, depending on how the draft goes. But the options that are still available to you, you'll still likely have a shot at Dame. You'll probably have a shot, like I said, at Cat, Kyrie, Scotty Barnes. These are all options to pair with Halliburton. I'd probably shy away from Kyrie and just, again, try to make sure that you get guys that are out there. But the choices still shouldn't be all that bad for the middle of the round. And then towards the end of the round is where things are really, in my mind, extremely complicated. Because you don't have, like, I got lucky. I got very lucky that the 13th team took Jalen Brunson here. If they took James Harden, I actually don't know what I would have done with my picks on the turn. It would have been Donovan Mitchell and I might have gone LaMelo Ball and just rolled the dice. And that's the problem with being at the back end of a 14-teamer. You've got to take a swing. You just don't have you don't have a choice. You're not going to catch up to the team with the first, second overall pick. You're like, if you don't punt a couple of things, a team with Wemby and Jokic is just going to steamroll you. They're so far out in front of you if you have to start with Donovan Mitchell, who's going to be pretty good, but might miss 20 games. We hope he doesn't, but you never know. And like Domantas Sabonis together. That's tough, man. So I think I would recommend, and this is more for head-to-head than roto. Roto, you try to balance it out a little bit, but head-to-head, you probably just lean into something. Whatever build you can get out of it, whether it's, Steph and Donovan Mitchell or Harden and Donovan Mitchell, or if Harden gets to you, I think that's the one where you carry a little bit of clout, but it might not work that way. It might have to be Donovan Mitchell and LaMelo Ball. And then you get a really nice start in steals and all the guard stats with a whole lot of risk hanging over your head. But boy, if you're punting what LaMelo's weak at, then he gives you a shot. That's probably the direction I would look at the very back end of the first round. If you're like 2 or 3 picks earlier and you're able to get someone like Tatum or Trae Young, or if you have a much better shot, say, to get Harden at like 12, the second round, you do have a few more choices. I don't know that you have to go LaMelo Ball there. You could go Booker. You could go Durant if he's still floating around. It just, like, your life gets a little bit easier. But boy, down at 14, I don't think Harden's going to be there at 14 all that often. I think this was by total chance with Anthony Edwards going early and Brunson going very early. That I think I got very lucky there. But if I didn't, I think you got to lean into it hard. And at that point, like, you're probably trying to win 5-6 categories. I don't think you're going for 7 or 8 anymore. You're probably in a triple punt because again, you're just not catching Luka and Jokic and Wemby and those guys at the top if you're trying to beat them in all 9 categories. You're just not. All right, let's look a little bit more at round 3 and round 4. And again, we're not going to let this show go too long right now, again, because odds of me waking up my children remain non-zero. This is round 3 and round 4. Round 3, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. Pretty early on Ja, although let's try to remember this is picks 29, 30, and then Ja 31. JJJ 32, Markkanen 33, Cade 34, Bam 35, Freddie VanVleet 36, Kawhi 37, Jalen Williams 38, Evan Mobley 39, DeJounte Murray 40, Jalen Johnson at 41, who came so very close to getting to me. And then I went Desmond Bane at 42, which again, I think I'm going to be doing that a bunch because he's a very safe pick in the 40s. 4th round of Miles Turner. That's me. I did Miles Turner there, but I'll be honest, I wasn't thinking a ton about it. Jimmy Butler at 44, Franz Wagner 45, Zion 46, Derek White 47, Jaylen Brown 48, DeAndre Ayton 49, Emmanuel Quickley at 50, Brandon Miller at 51. No way. Jalen Duren 52, Pascal Siakam 53, Mikal Bridges 54, Rudy Gobert 55, Jared Allen 56. Interestingly, 3rd and 4th rounds, other than Ja going probably 6-7 slots earlier than I thought, and that allowing everybody else to sort of slip one, these were relatively parallel to the Yahoo X ranks. DeAndre Ayton maybe a little earlier than expected. Same with Zion and Brandon Miller. And then, that allowed someone like a Rudy Gobert to perhaps slip a pick or two later. And again, we can look at this one draft, and I don't know that we can necessarily say, oh, these are the guys that are going to be near you. But one thing that I think we can look at and just sort of take a chunk here is say, look, if you're a middle round pick 5 through pick 10, something like that, the guys that are going to be on the board for you in the 3rd round that you're going to be thinking about are going to be guys like JJJ, Markkanen, possibly Cade, Bam, VanVleet. I think this is earlier than they probably needed to go on Kawhi. Jalen Williams, probably going more towards the early end of that. Mobley, DeJounte Murray, Jalen Johnson, Desmond Bane, all that kind of stuff. So I think you're still going to have a pretty good chance to get the 3rd rounder you wanted, even in a 12-teamer, in a 14-teamer in the 3rd. Because, look, Jalen Johnson made it to 40, and I'll take him in the mid-30s. And Freddie VanVleet, he made it to the mid-30s. I'd take him earlier than that. Cade, reasonable. Jalen Williams, reasonable. Evan Mobley, very reasonable. I don't think we need to panic much about the 3rd round. Let's talk a little bit about the 4th round. 4th round is interesting because, well, hold on. One more thing on the 3rd before we move on. What if you're at the back end of it? Because that's what we haven't really talked about yet. Again, it's going to be really tough to be pick 14 because you're all the way down at number 42 at this point. And again, I was legitimately one player away from not really being certain what I was going to do here. Bane and Miles Turner were the 2 guys I thought at 42, 43 were pretty reasonable. Jimmy Butler would have been kind of a backup option. Same with Derek White, I think would have been pretty good there. But here's the problem. When you're drafting on the turn of a 14-teamer or deeper, frankly, you've pretty much locked yourself into a punt after your first 2 picks. Which in general, you guys know I hate to do. Hate it. I want to try to go as deep into a draft as I can before deciding what my team is actually truly bad at. Trying to just get good players. You can't really operate that way in a deep league. You can't just, if you get in a hyper deep league, 20 to 30 teams, then you're drafting durability almost beyond everything else, because if you lose a guy, you're replacing them with the 350th ranked dude, and your team is just turds at that point. 14-teamer, you still got pretty damn good players through the first 7-ish rounds instead of 8 or 9. Basically, that's the big difference. But again, if you're 14th and you're trying to set up a team that has a shot to beat Nikola Jokic team or a Wemby team in the playoffs, you've had to make your decision on what your team is right out of the chute. And this team, as you guys saw, I went Harden, Donovan Mitchell. That's a team that's going to be pretty good at scoring, very good at threes. We don't really know what kind of rebounding team it's going to be because we have 2 guards. Assists are solid. Steals are solid. Blocks are actually not horrible, considering I only have 2 guards. Field goal is going to be not good. And free throw is going to be very strong for that team. Turnover is also not particularly good. So I probably have to just write off a category at that point. But I don't know which one it's going to be yet. And it gets to the end of this 3rd round, and all the guys that I thought would have been interesting fits for that team are gone. So at this point, I was thinking, all right, if I'm some kind of punt build, what do I do here? And ultimately, I just decided Desmond Bane was kind of a safe play. I think he's probably going to be ranked in the 40s this year. He's going to get you more threes, more points, a smattering of boards, assists, and steals. He's going to be good at the free throw line. He's sort of continuing to add on the things that I already have. Because unfortunately, there wasn't really a traditional point guard type. Like I would have preferred DeJounte Murray there. Or either of the Jalens would have been useful. I don't think Freddie VanVleet was going to make it that far. The regrettable move here is Jimmy Butler might have actually made more sense because my team already had so many threes, and maybe you want the steals more. But again, steals are so iffy on a week-to-week basis, and Butler misses so many damn ball games. And then I went Miles Turner to start the next round because I thought at some point I'm going to need a center. My team is trash at field goal percent. I have a few things that I can think about trying to make up ground in. And I thought, all right, Desmond Bane's going to get me like half a block. Harden's probably going to get me half a block. I'm not buried in that category, especially when I can maybe go find 1 or 2 guys that are 2 block a game dudes that are not bad for free throw percent. So I went Miles Turner. This is a little bit of a fit pick. He's not an assist guy, which is a shame because I'm going to need him. But I also need 2 blocks a game. I need to get back in the mix in that one. I need to be able to beat the other mid-pack teams in that, especially the other ones that might be punting some of the stuff that I'm punting. And also, I just like Derek White is an outstanding roto play in this range, but he kind of makes no sense for this particular team. I needed the scoring of Desmond Bane. I needed the shot blocking of Miles Turner. I didn't need the well-rounded appeal of Derek White. I didn't want to go Emmanuel quickly this early. That's the other player that I would have eyeballed in this range. And so that was it. There just wasn't anybody there that made sense. But these are the guys to think about. If you're at the end of the 3rd, beginning of the 4th, this is the type of player you need to be looking at. Late 30s to early 40s. It's guys like Jalen Johnson, DeJounte Murray, Desmond Bane, Miles Turner, Evan Mobley, Jimmy Butler. I don't want Franz Wagner or Zion in this range. Derek White is there. So try to figure out among those names who fits with your particular team build. If you're mid-round in the 4th, we're talking about that's like kind of around pick 50. So those guys are like Derek White, Jaylen Brown, DeAndre Ayton, Emmanuel Quickley, Jalen Duren. If you're thinking this doesn't sound that great, you'd be right. I'd be perfectly comfortable with you guys. If you can't get Derek White, I'd be quite comfortable with you guys going Emmanuel Quickley or even jumping down to like a Mikal or Miles Bridges or Rudy Gobert or Jared Allen. Those guys are actually fine there. Although they did, in this particular instance, make it to the end of the 4th round. Not for any magical reason, really. I don't know that anybody went way earlier than expected. The order was a little bit shuffled, and maybe Brandon Miller allowed everybody to kind of slip one slot. But if you're at the end of that 4th round, now you're talking about the mid-50s in guys. And luckily, that's where Gobert and Jared Allen have kind of been slipping to lately. So you have a little bit of an opportunity there. And if we look at the beginning of round 5, these are some of the other names that you'd have an opportunity to grab mid-50s if you wanted. That's Jamal Murray, Miles Bridges, DeMar DeRozan. And I don't think that I would go beyond that mid-50s unless you wanted to go Tobias Harris or stretch and grab Darius Garland a little bit early. Mid-5th round, and did I remember to read the names in the 4th round? I think I did, but I can't really remember. 5th round, DeMar DeRozan, 57. I think it's 57 now. Jamal Murray at 58, Miles Bridges at 59, Zach LaVine is number 60, Julius Randle, 61. You guys can count with me now. Simons, Bradley Beal, Tobias Harris, Nikola Vucevic, And Darius Garland takes us to 66, Cam Thomas at 67, Josh Giddey 68, Nick Claxton 69, and Isaiah Hartenstein on pick 70. Again, I don't think that this is a terrifying zone. If you are, we've talked about if you have a pick kind of towards the beginning of it, you still have some choices there. I think DeRozan's relatively safe. I think Miles Bridges is sort of oddly safe as a pick in that range. If you think Jamal Murray can stay upright, he's actually kind of got a little bit of upside. You're inching towards 60. So Harris, Bradley Beal, Vooch, Garland, all of those guys in my mind are fine through the first half of the fifth round of a 14-teamer. They're all totally fine. And if you're operating towards the middle of the round and maybe some of those players are off the board for you, now you're at, where does that put us? Kind of mid 60s, low to mid 60s. Hopefully Tobias still there, Beal, Vooch, Garland. If those guys are not on the board, now you're looking at, you're honestly in a little bit of trouble at that point because you probably have to pull someone from a little bit farther down, like an Isaiah Hartenstein, like a D'Angelo Russell, and it gets dries up fast. So this is, and there's this pocket here that formed in this particular draft, and I don't think that's the way it's going to work in all of them. You know, the order of these drafts is so fluid that you can't really ever know for certain. But like if all of those guys dry up, I think you probably, in this one, if we want to say after Darius Garland, so Garland went at pick 66, and that's late for him, but Simons went a little early, and it's not that crazy. Like if Garland went in front of Beal, Harris, and Vooch, then you just slide them all down. So basically it gets you to like around pick 65. And then you're kind of into the next tier. And you have to make a judgment call. Do I want to go with Cam Thomas? That's what someone did before me. Then Giddey, Claxton. In my mind, I was willing to just play it on Hartenstein. I would have taken him 5 slots sooner if I had to, because I didn't like the other guys that were available to me there. With the build I was creating, Hartenstein made sense because you get steals, assists, some blocks, doesn't ruin your free throw percent kind of stuff, and I could just continue to lean into assists elsewhere. Jordan Poole and D'Angelo Russell were the other guys that I considered in this range. I went Poole at 71. D'Lo would have been totally fine there as well. But I think you just like be comfortable with that next group of Hartenstein, Poole, Russell. I don't know that any of these other guys really fall into that bucket necessarily. And then things dry up because if you're looking at the next round, it goes Poole, Russell with the guys I liked. And then there's this long list of dudes that I'm really not all that interested in. This is round 6 now. So this is just counting up from 70. Ingram at 73. Nope. Vassell at 74. Nope. Nurk at 75. Not really, unless I'm punting. Holiday at 76. Although I guess with this team, maybe it could have withstood a free throw hit. Anunoby at 77. Sexton at 78. Kuminga at 79. Michael Porter Jr. at 80. Tyler Hero, 81, Keegan Murray, 82, Brook Lopez, 83, and Mark Williams, 84. This, in my mind, is where things get fugly in a 14-teamer. So everybody's panicking about how getting their pairings and whatever. I think in the 6th round is when things really start to spiral out of control. Because if you don't get one of those first couple of picks and suddenly you find yourself somewhere in the early 80s, you have to make the call if you like any of these guys. And like Michael Porter Jr. around 80 is probably relatively safe, as is Brook Lopez in the 80s. Colin Sexton near 80 is somewhat safe. And frankly, if Brandon Ingram went like 10 picks later, he's probably somewhat safe there as well, as is Drew Holiday. But there really isn't much in the way of excitement in this group. Where's the excitement? The answer is it's not there. I can tell you that teams started to drop out around this point, so I also started to consider a dropout. But like the names that pop up at the beginning of round 7, just for your edification, I don't have a slide on this one. McCollum, Jabari Smith Jr., Bogdan Bogdanovic, Caruso, Valanciunas, Trey Murphy, who's hurt, Jakob Poeltl, and then now you're towards the back end of that 7th round. So again, this is where, in my mind, you want to start thinking about fit. in a 14-teamer is probably the end of the 6th round or the 7th round, as opposed to in a 12-teamer, that's something you can probably put off until the end of the 8th, maybe even the 9th round. And it makes sense because there's 2 extra picks in each round. So by the 6th round, you're running around deeper, right? 2 extra picks each round. By the end of the 3rd round, you're running 6 picks deeper. 36 versus 42, blah, blah, blah. You guys can do the math on that. So again, by the end of the 6th round, that's 12 extra picks that have come off the board. Whereas in a 12-teamer, your 7th round begins at pick 73. In this one, it begins at pick 84. You're basically a full round ahead, behind, however you want to set it up nomenclature-wise. And there's a weird little dry pocket there. But don't be afraid to really wedge in fit pieces, I think, by around this zone in a 14-teamer. We're not going to go any deeper on this one because, again, once you hit the auto picks, it kind of throws things off. But I'll say this, by like the end of round 7, you're starting to get into that 100 range. You're starting to get into taking a few shots. I find it kind of exciting. And I'm sure you guys are like, who are you going to do as the late flyers? Well, just go watch the late flyers episode because that'll cover you 10-team, 12-team, 14-team, whatever. That'll take care of all of that stuff. So the overarching message on today's show is, first of all, don't freak out. You're going to be okay. 14-teamers are a little bit bigger than 12, but you still have a perfectly good option. If you're in the front end, you got a chance to see some of the dudes that are coming back to you in the 2nd/3rd, the 4th/5th. If you're in the middle, we kind of looked at the same stuff. And if you're at the back end, that's where you really got to figure out how to thread the needle. Because again, unless you're just the best drafter ever and you're in a league with a bunch of goobers, you're going to have to figure out the narrow path to catch up with those front teams, especially because Yahoo drafts don't have 3rd round reversal, which is particularly rough the deeper the league gets. I mean, you really got to have it, but they don't. So, like, you're talking about the difference between pick 29 and 42 now, I think, right? If you have the first pick of the 3rd round versus the last, that's a full, I mean, that's a chasm in a 14-teamer. So really deep think fit if you have a pick near the end of a 14-teamer, even more so. I mean, you got to think fit a lot, even at the end of a 12-teamer, but your picks at 12, 13, it doesn't seem like it should be that big of a deal. But again, like someone like a James Harden is probably going to be there at the end of a 12-teamer, and he's probably not at the end of a 14. If that's the guy you wanted, well, sorry. Now you're going to have to pick from guys that are either low per game dudes that hopefully stay healthy or high per game dudes that probably won't. Thanks for watching, everybody. I know this is a weird middle of the night pod release, but you do what you got to do. It's draft season, and we're doing it. I'm Dan Vespers for the Old Man Squad. Like, rate, subscribe on your way out. Tomorrow we will have our typical 2-pack. We're talking to Noah Rubin. We'll get a little update on some of the players that he's looking at here now on the new Yahoo board. We'll also check out ADP shifts. It's our second to last ADP shift of the preseason. So show, I should say, of the preseason. Those have been a lot of fun. We've discovered a lot of really interesting trends on the board. And so those will be our funds for Monday. We'll have some real drafts to break down here soon, won't we? All right, let's wrap it up. It's bedtime for everybody. I'm Dan. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. See you guys later.